right, so step one, we're going to go ahead and show you how to make little hillside models that might help the students create an engineering solution to the problem of erosion when you build homes on the hillside. Students are asked to consider themselves as developers, and they have been asked to create a model of a home on a hillside and think about the engineering that might be needed to prevent erosion. So our first model we're going to build is going to be one where we build the hillside and we put the house on the hill, and then we test it to see how the water might flow through that model development. Here we go. So to start with, you have your meat tray. I'm gonna just put it on a brick, a Lego brick, because then you can kind of see the runoff, like to simulate a hill. Then we have the different kinds of earth materials. So we have the pebbles, the powdered clay, the sand, and the garden soil. I actually Googled to figure out, well, what would an actual person do if they were developing land? What kind of materials do they need to think about using, and how would you use it? And in my reading, it gave me some ideas of what allows water to percolate through and what substances might hold water, prevent water from going through, which would result in runoff. So the whole idea here is we need to think about how we might use these materials to allow either the water to run through, but not like a quick flash flood where the water just goes sliding down the hill. Another thing we might want to think about is, how do we keep the house from sliding down the hill? So in today's activity, we're going to focus on how to prevent the land from eroding. So first, let's look at the materials. We're going to layer it. We'll start with the pebbles. I'm going to do this flat first. You can also mix it, so you might do sand and dirt. So you might, to make it handy, you might want to have these little cups at the materials table for the students to get materials from, or you might have them already set up for them at each group. These come in the kits, and those would make a great place to maybe mix two materials. And then you have a spoon where you can mix it. And you don't have to do this dry. I mean, it's kind of up to you how you want to do this. I'm going to go ahead and just pour it in there. Okay. And then you might even want to add a little clay. And then I wouldn't add too much clay, but maybe sprinkle some on there. And I feel like I need to add a little more dirt here. Okay. All right, so then once I have that, I'm thinking I need to get it a little bit moist, because typically you'd have that moisture. Now what the clay will do is it kind of helps stick everything together. And then I'm going to put I have this huge bag of Legos that I found in the back room thinking, okay, well, these would be great to make houses, but you can use whatever. I think it's nice to have some kind of model house for the students to make it look novel and like a real model, right? So then you can just put the house right on top, like so. And then you might just have it rain to see what might happen. So this is the initial model just to see, all right, what's going on when it rains? What's going on to the area around the house when it rains? And you know, you could maybe do like a big storm. Don't worry about it getting a little messy on the tables. You can always make sure that you have some kind of towels at each table to have the kids clean up as they go. All right, so we can kind of start to see, obviously, some of the land is trickling down with the water. So that presents the engineering problem. So you would say to the kids, all right, we have a problem here. We don't want to lose the land every time it rains, and eventually we're not going to be able to keep that house on there. Maybe you show them pictures of some houses that are on lakefronts that actually, you know, have some trouble with erosion, and you may even find some websites where it talks about what you can do to prevent erosion in situations like this. So our next step is to brainstorm what could we use to serve as like a retaining wall or some kind of material that might hold the land back so that it doesn't trickle down with the water in the event of, you know, snowstorms, rain, flooding, this type of thing. So one of the things that I came up with that's not in the kit that I think is really cool would be this idea of the webbing that comes from when you buy onions and oranges and things like that. I think it's really fun. They come in all different types and styles. So it would be neat to have these available on your materials table to get the kids to maybe think about using it. Have some rocks available as another concept. And then have some craft sticks out to possibly get them to think maybe we could make a retaining wall using the craft sticks. You could maybe even do toothpicks. We're going to show the next one. All right, so I'm going to move this. Another option is to use some of these rocks to boulder up that shoreline, or if you want to call it hillside, and then you can do the same thing. I essentially kind of layered the earth similarly. Again, you can try rain. You can, if you don't have the sprayer, you know, and you want the students to just do it with their little cups, they could do that too. You could use an X amount of material. Everybody use the same amount to see, you know, what might happen. Okay. So that's another idea. So we might use this as a way to, you might have seen this before, like webbing on the side of a hill to kind of hold, prevent rocks from falling down a hillside. Or you might have even seen some type of garden webbing that people use in their own gardens. So we can go ahead and do this again. Trying to decide how I want to do this. I think I'm going to cut some of this. Right, I'm going to use this piece right here. I might even just double it. right? So you can use, there's just all these materials. And in real life, I did a little research. They even make ones that are, more biodegradable, if you will, or earth friendly. Okay, so we'll go through the same process here. And you don't have to use this order that I'm doing. You can try different things. The important thing is to have the kids think through and plan their engineering design before they actually do it, so that they have good reasons for why they do it the way they do. If you're trying to make this experiment very technical and you're like doing it as a whole class, there may be some controls that you put into it. For example, notice that I don't have an exact science for how I'm building these hills. Well, it may be that the whole class decides, well, it just depends on what you want to focus on. So like for today, we're just focusing on the retaining wall concept, but you may want to change it up in a different school year and say, hey, I want to focus on how we layer the dirts. And then you just let that be the variable. So if you change too many variables, you can't tell what's actually, effective. So we might want to do something like this. Layer here. Some kids might actually want to bring in like some moss or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to wet this first before I put the house down. You might decide that the structure, so I read another article where it was about the construction of the house themselves, like how people build homes on hillsides. So one of the things was actual, I don't know what the technical term for is, but like in making sure that your structure goes down into the ground. So maybe using craft sticks or, more of the Lego piece, getting the, foundation, maybe working on that foundation, the subfloor part of it might be something you could focus on. So you can get as like creative as you want to. I would recommend though that maybe you should pick, one area to focus on. So one control would be, like I said before, maintaining the same amount of water if you were trying to compare models. And then if you were to look closely, you can kind of see on this model that the water that's fallen off of the hillside is actually clear. Okay, we're going to do one more. That mesh worked remarkably well. This is me just messing around. I have no idea how the outcome's going to be, but that's what you're doing in the classroom. Like literally, you do not have to be afraid of things not being perfect. It's pretty safe. You're not going to hurt anything. And when there are fails, I want to remind you that fails are good because they kind of give you insight into what needs to be fixed. Like you first have to, in engineering, you first have to know what doesn't work before you can try a next trial to see what does work. So that's why I showed you the first one, especially where we didn't have any type of retaining wall or anything, and you can kind of see the dirt, started to just erode and trickle down the hill. And with the second one, the large boulders in front, that didn't really help much either. So, trying the mesh, okay, that's got some potential there. Well, what else is there? Could we try what would happen if we used craft sticks? So we'll run through the layering piece one more time. So when you're thinking about earth materials, you're thinking about like the size of the particle. So if you think about pebbles, there's a lot of space in between that kind of lets the water run through. You don't want standing water around your house, so you got to think about that. Water also goes through sand pretty well. So really important that you give the kids a chance. I know it's like a little bit messy, but kids love science, and this idea of giving them the time to play with the actual materials, this is important. One thing I might mention though, clay is a little bit harsh on the skin, so you may, check to see if you have any kids that are sensitive. I actually probably wouldn't have them get into the clay. Also, it's a fine particle matter, so be careful with the dust around kids, especially who might be sensitive to dust. Okay, so last one we're doing here, we're going to do a retaining wall. So I'm thinking these craft sticks might be cool to try out. So first, I'm going to wet this. And I'm just going to put a little more stuff here. I feel like I need a little more. Okay. If you don't want the kids to use their hands, they could use a spoon. All these options, it's what you're comfortable with and what your students are comfortable with. Okay, so let's get this wet. Get that retaining wall in there. So you might have to cut some of these. I did not think of that actually. So let's see. A little bit. You might want to cut these in advance for the students or have a way to do that. Okay, and then the house. Let's put it on a hill. Have the students talk about, also with models, talk about the limitations of models. They're not exactly, this isn't exactly what a house might look like on a hillside. But you can talk about, how it's a good model and how it might not be a good model. Obviously, you're not just going to stick a house right there. There's going to be some kind of post to get the house in there, for example. If you want to worry about posts, that can be a subject for a different time you do this. Oops. Oh, we have land sinking here. Okay, and then I might. Again, try not to get it so that you're thinking, oh, it's got to be the perfect model. Let's also look for, well, first time, second time, third time, it may not work out very well. And then the important thing is to take notice of, well, what's not working? Why isn't it working? So for instance, for this one, you know, you can see the water's just kind of going right through. So then the students might have to think about, well, yeah, this model doesn't work. Maybe we need to, you know, add some other things. Maybe we need to add that with the webbing. And one other thing we didn't talk about is you might decide you want to try using some other materials to think about drainage and gutters, things like that. So there's different ways you can go with this challenge.